12 years I have worked this land, and still you say I owe more?
Then perhaps you should learn to count, farmer.
The bowl is not the right measure.
Liking helps us bring you more stories. Now, let's begin. Long ago, in a quiet farming village at the foot of a low mountain, there lived a tenant farmer named Chilsung. He was neither clever with words nor blessed with fortune. He simply worked from the first light of morning to the last light of evening. His wife, Ongnyo, kept their small home in order, and their 2 children grew up thin but cheerful, used to going without. The land Chilsung farmed belonged to a man named Hogu, the wealthiest landowner in the region. Most mornings, Chilsung wake before the rooster did, walking the narrow paths between the paddies while mist still clung to the low ground. His son, barely 8, liked to trail behind him carrying a small basket, pretending to be just as useful as his father. "When I am grown," the boy liked to say, "I will own land of my own, and no one will ever measure my rice with someone else's bowl." Chilsung would only laugh softly at that and ruffle his son's hair and say nothing more. What was there to say to a boy who did not yet understand? Ongnyo, meanwhile, spent her mornings mending clothes for families who could pay a little extra, and her afternoons stretching whatever rice they had left into something that might pass for a meal. It was not an easy life, but it was, until that autumn, a life they had learned to bear. Hogu was proud of 2 things above all else: his storehouses and his family name. He walked through the village in silk robes, just a little too fine for a man of his actual rank, greeting no one first. A man's worth, he liked to say, is measured by what sits behind his gate. And what sat behind his gate, he claimed, was something no other family in the province could boast. A pearl, smooth and faintly blue, said to have belonged to his grandfather. "This is no ordinary stone," Hogu would tell his guests, holding it up to the candlelight. "It is said to see straight into a man's heart. The honest man it blesses, the dishonest man it curses." Villagers whispered about the pearl more than they had ever actually seen it. That was exactly how Hogu wanted it. Every autumn, when the harvest came in, tenants like Chilsung carried their rice to Hogu's storehouse to pay their rent. There, Hogu's steward, a thin, nervous man named Bongu, measured out each family's share using one particular wooden bowl. It was an old bowl, chipped at the rim, its handle worn smooth and dark. Somehow, no matter how heavy a farmer's sack felt on the walk over, it always came up short at Bongu's counting table. "You still owe 3 mal more," Bongu would mutter, eyes on the ground, never quite meeting anyone's gaze. Farmers grumbled among themselves in low voices, far from the landlord's gate. But grumbling was as far as it ever went. Hogu was not a man to be questioned, not by farmers, not by anyone who owed him land, food, or favor. That year, the harvest had been good, the best in 3 seasons, in fact. Chilsung had worked the fields until his hands bled, hoping that this year, finally, there might be enough left over for his family. He filled his rice sack until it strained at the seams and carried it, with real hope in his chest, to Hogu's storehouse. Bongu poured the rice into the old wooden bowl, level by level, counting under his breath. 9 mal, Bongu said. "You owe 11. You are short by 2. Chilsung stood frozen. "Short? I harvested more this year than I ever have in my life." "The bowl does not lie," Bongu said quietly, not lifting his eyes. Chil-sung looked past him, toward the storehouse doors, where Hogu stood watching, arms folded, saying nothing at all. That night, Chil-sung's family ate watered porridge. His daughter, only 6 years old, asked why there was no rice. Soon, Ongnyo told her, brushing the hair from her face. Soon there will be rice again. But Chil-sung could not sleep. He sat outside their small house, staring at nothing, turning one question over and over in his mind. How could a good harvest leave him with less than a poor one ever had? It happened just then that an old memory surfaced. Years ago, as a boy, Chil-sung had once helped repair that very storehouse floor. And beneath it, hidden under a loose board, he remembered a second bowl, identical in shape to the one Bongu used, but smaller, noticeably smaller. At the time, he had thought nothing of it. A spare bowl, perhaps, or a broken one set aside. Now, sitting in the dark with an empty stomach and a hungry child asleep inside, that memory would not leave him alone. The next morning, Chil-sung went looking for answers, though he barely knew where to begin. He tried the village elder first, an old man named Dusik who had lived through 3 landlords and buried 2 wives. "Grandfather," Chil-sung said, "I believe Hogu's measuring bowl is smaller than it should be. I think we are all being cheated." Dusik's face went pale. He glanced toward the road as though Hogu himself might be listening from a great distance. "Even if that is true," Dusik said, lowering his voice, "who among us would dare accuse him? He holds every deed to every field in this village." "Then we simply let him keep taking?" Chil-sung asked. "Every year, a little more, until there is nothing left to take." Dusik had no answer for that. He only shook his head and shuffled away, leaving Chil-sung standing alone in the road. Chil-sung tried once more, this time going straight to Hogu's gate. He was made to wait 3 hours before he was even allowed inside. When he finally stood before the landlord, Chil-sung spoke as plainly as he knew how. "My lord, I believe the measuring bowl at your storehouse is not the true government standard. I ask, respectfully, that it be checked." Hogu's expression did not change. He simply reached for the pearl resting on its velvet cushion beside him, turning it slowly between his fingers. "Do you know what this stone does, farmer?" Hogu asked, almost gently. "It sees straight into the hearts of dishonest men who accuse their betters to hide their own debts." "My lord, I only ask that the bowl—" "Careful," Hogu said, and his voice had lost all its gentleness now. "A man who spreads lies about his landlord may find himself with no land to farm at all." Chil-sung left that gate with nothing. No proof, no support, only a warning ringing in his ears. Word of Chil-sung's visit spread through the village faster than smoke. Some farmers pitied him. A few laughed behind their hands, certain he had ruined himself for nothing. But one evening, an old woman named Somi, who sold rice cakes near the market gate, pulled Chil-sung aside. "You are not the first to notice that bowl," she whispered. "My husband noticed it too, 20 years ago. He never said a word after that, not once, until the day he died." "Why not?" Chil-sung asked. "Because saying it changes nothing," Somi said. "Hogu holds the deed. Hogu holds the bowl. Hogu holds the pearl that frightens half this village into silence. What does a farmer hold against all of that?" Chil-sung walked home that night, turning her words over and over. What did a farmer hold against a landlord's gate, a rigged bowl, and a stone said to see straight into a man's soul? Nothing, perhaps. Unless he could find a way to turn Hogu's own pride against him. For Hogu did not merely want to be rich. He wanted to be seen as rich and honest and blessed by heaven itself. And a man like that, Chilsung realized, could be led carefully, publicly, where he could not simply wave a hand and make the problem disappear. An idea began to take shape. 2 days later, a widow named Jungwoo stopped Chilsung on the road, her basket of washing balanced on one hip. "I heard what you did at the landlord's gate," she said. "Foolish. Brave, maybe, but foolish." "Perhaps both," Chilsung admitted. "Does it matter which, if nothing changes either way?" Jungwoo was quiet for a moment. Her late husband had farmed the eastern fields for Hogu back before the fever took him 3 winters ago. "My husband kept a record," she finally said, glancing around before lowering her voice further. "Every harvest, every measure, written in his own hand. He never dared show it to anyone." "Would you show it to me?" Chilsung asked. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded. "If it helps end this, then yes. He would have wanted that, I think." That evening, by lamplight, Chilsung studied years of careful handwriting. Season after season, the same pattern repeated. A harvest reported. A shortfall claimed. Never once in the family's favor. It was not proof enough on its own. Numbers on a widow's page could be dismissed as a grieving woman's confusion, Hogu would surely say. But it was one more thread in a rope Chilsung was slowly, carefully braiding together. "If it comes to it," Jungwoo said, "I will stand in that square and say what I know. I am tired of staying quiet for a dead man's sake." The village's autumn festival was only 2 weeks away. Every year, families gathered at the square for food, music, and games. This year, there was extra reason for celebration. A matchmaker from a noble family in the capital was traveling through the province, and Hogu had spent weeks arranging to host her. If his daughter married well, into a family higher than his own, Hogu's name would rise with it. He wanted nothing more. Chilsung learned this from Bonggu's wife, who let it slip while buying rice cakes from Somi. "He means to show off the pearl at the festival," she said, "in front of the whole village, in front of the matchmaker herself. He says it will prove his family's fortune runs deep." That was exactly the opening Chilsung needed. Around that same time, a traveling merchant named Yoon passed through the village, buying and selling goods on his slow route toward the capital. Merchant Yoon had a reputation. He had once trained under a court appraiser and could name the true worth of jade, silk, and stone with a single glance. Chilsung found him resting near the village well and told him everything. The bowl, the pearl, the years of quiet debts no one dared to question. "Why come to me?" Yoon asked. "This is not my village, not my fight." "Because you know stone," Chilsung said. "And because Hogu plans to show his pearl to a matchmaker in 2 weeks, in front of everyone. If it is truly what he claims, nothing is lost. But if it is not..." Yoon studied him for a long moment. "And if I say yes, and he ruins me for it afterward?" "Then at least the truth will already be out," Chilsung said. "A landlord can silence one farmer easily enough. He cannot silence an entire village that has seen the truth with its own eyes." Yoon was quiet for a long while, turning a small stone over in his own fingers. "There is a way to test a stone in front of a crowd," he finally said. "Without needing to say a single accusing word myself, let the stone speak for itself." The days before the festival crawled by, slow and tense. Chilsung gathered the courage to visit Dusik once more, and this time the old man did not turn him away. If this fails, Dusik warned, Hogu will not simply take back his warning. He will take your land, your home, everything. I know, Chilsung said. But if it succeeds, this village stops living in fear of one bowl and one stone. Slowly, quietly, others began to come forward. Farmers who had also noticed their harvests never quite added up. A widow who remembered her late husband's suspicions. Even Bongu himself, pale and trembling, admitted in a whisper that he had always known the bowl was wrong and had hated measuring it every single year. Will you say so, if it comes to that? Chilsung asked him. Bongu did not answer right away. I have a family too, he finally said. I am afraid. But I am also tired of being afraid. That same evening, Chilsung was summoned to Hogug's gate without warning. His stomach dropped the moment he heard the request. He was led not to the outer hall this time, but to Hogu's private study, where the landlord sat alone, the pearl resting beside him as always. You have been asking a great many questions lately, Hogu said, not bothering to look up. About bowls, about old debts, about a merchant who arrived in this village at a very convenient time. I only wish to understand my own harvest, my lord, Chilsung said carefully. Hogu finally raised his eyes, and there was nothing warm in them. Do not mistake my patience for foolishness, farmer. I built everything I have with my own 2 hands. I will not let a tenant with an empty rice sack tear it down over gossip. No one wishes to tear anything down, my lord, Chilsung said, only to see the truth, whatever it may be. The truth, Hogu repeated, almost to himself, turning the pearl slowly in the candlelight. Be very careful which truths you go looking for, farmer. Not every stone you overturn has something pleasant waiting underneath. Chilsung left that study with his heart pounding, uncertain whether he had just been warned, threatened, or both at once. Either way, there was no turning back now. The festival was only 2 days away. On the morning of the festival, word reached Hogu that a magistrate's official, pasando por una rutina inspección de provincial land records, had agreed to stop by the celebration as an honored guest. Hogu was delighted. A matchmaker and a magistrate's official, both witnessing his family's fortune in a single afternoon. What could be better? He did not know that the routine inspection had been quietly requested by Merchant Yoon, who had connections in the capital from his years of trade. He did not know that the government's official measuring bowl, the true and unchangeable standard, would be arriving in the official's traveling case. And he certainly did not know that his own steward, Bongu, had spent the last 2 nights not sleeping at all. That afternoon, disaster nearly struck. Bongu, sick with nerves, came to Chilsung just hours before the festival began. I cannot do it, he said, his hands shaking. If I speak against my master, I will have nothing. No position, no home, nothing. Bongu, Chilsung said, you already have nothing. You have spent years measuring lies into other men's suffering. Is that truly less frightening than the truth? Bongu said nothing for a long moment. Then, quietly, he nodded. But a second, sharper problem arrived not long after. Hogu himself sent word that he had decided at the last moment not to bring the pearl to the festival after all. Too great a treasure for a village square, his message read. It will remain locked away, safe as it always has been. Chilsung's plan depended entirely on that pearl being seen, tested, out in the open, in front of every witness who mattered. Without it, there would be nothing to compare against the official's true measuring bowl, nothing to catch Hogu's pride off guard, nothing at all. What could Chilisung do, with only a few hours left and his one chance slipping away? He thought of the one thing Hogu could never resist. Not fear, not obligation. Pride. Chirsung sent a message back through Bongu, worded carefully, as though it came from a festival attendant eager to please an important guest. The matchmaker has expressed great curiosity about the famous pearl. She has heard so much, she says, and hopes she might be permitted to see it with her own eyes today. Within the hour, Hogu changed his mind entirely. By late afternoon, the village square was full. Lanterns strung between the trees, tables heavy with food, children weaving through the crowd with sticky hands. Hogu arrived dressed in his finest robes, the matchmaker seated beside him under a canopy of silk, the magistrate's official standing nearby with quiet, unreadable patience. "Friends," Hogu announced, raising his voice for the whole square, "today I share with you a treasure passed down through generations of my family." He lifted the pearl from its velvet cushion, holding it up, so the afternoon light caught its pale blue surface. "This stone," he said, "sees into the hearts of men. It has blessed my family's honesty for 3 generations." A murmur passed through the crowd. Somewhere near the back, Chilsung caught merchant Yoon's eye and gave the smallest nod. Yoon stepped forward, bowing respectfully. "My lord, forgive my boldness. As a merchant who has handled many fine stones, might I have the honor of examining such a legendary treasure up close?" Hogu, flattered by the request in front of his important guests, waved him forward with a generous smile. "Of course. Let everyone see it properly." Yoon took the pearl carefully, turning it slowly in the light. He pressed it gently against a small brass scale he had brought, and then against a thin sheet of glass. The square had gone very quiet. "An interesting piece," Yoon said slowly. "Tested, my lord. Has this stone ever been tested against fire or scratched against true jade?" "Tested?" Hogu laughed, though it came out a little too high. "It is a pearl of great age. Why would it need testing?" "Because," Yoon said, holding it up so the sunlight passed straight through it, "a true pearl does not let light pass through its center. Like this, glass." A gasp rippled through the crowd. The matchmaker's polite smile faltered. "That is absurd," Hogu snapped. "That stone has been in my family for as long as you have claimed it has," Yun said gently. "Shall we ask the magistrate's official for a second opinion? He has, I believe, examined treasures for the royal court itself." The official stepped forward. "The merchant is correct, my lord. This is colored glass. Well made, but glass." Hogu's face drained of all its color. The whole square seemed to be holding its breath at once. "This means nothing," Hogu said, too loudly, grasping for footing. "A stone's worth does not measure a man's honesty." "You said it did, my lord," a voice called out from the crowd. "Not 1 hour ago." It was Chilsung. He stepped forward, his heart pounding, but his voice steady. "You have used that pearl for years to frighten your tenants into silence," Chilsung said. "You told us it could see straight into a dishonest heart. Perhaps, my lord, it is time we looked a little closer at your storehouse bowl instead." Hogu's eyes went wide with fury. "How dare you!" But the magistrate's official was already speaking, his voice calm and carrying across the square. "Since we are already testing what is true and what is false today," he said, Let us also compare the landlord's measuring bowl against the official government standard I carry with me. A matter of simple record-keeping, nothing more. Hogu had no way to refuse without confirming every suspicion already forming in the crowd around him. Bongu, pale but resolute, was sent to fetch the bowl from the storehouse. When the two bowls were finally set side by side on the festival table, the difference was unmistakable even from a distance. Hogu's bowl was smaller, noticeably, unmistakably smaller. 2 full measures short, the official said, after pouring rice carefully between them. For how many years has this bowl been in use, my lord? Silence was Hogu's only answer. From somewhere in the crowd, Jongwol stepped forward, a folded paper trembling slightly in her hand. My late husband kept his own record of every harvest he brought to this storehouse, she said, her voice carrying further than she seemed to expect. Every year, the same shortfall. I did not understand why, until today. She held the paper out to the official, who took it and studied it with a slow, deliberate care that made the square fall silent all over again. Bongu, standing off to the side, finally spoke without being asked. "It is true," he said quietly, then louder, as though the words themselves had loosened something in his chest. "I measured it myself, every year. I knew." "I was afraid to say so." Hogu rounded on him, face twisted with fury. "You dare?" "I dare, my lord," Bongu said, and for the first time in years he did not look away. "Because I am more ashamed of my silence than I have ever been of anything else." What happened next spread through the village faster than any harvest news ever had. The magistrate's official ordered an immediate accounting of Hogu's storehouse records against every tenant's rightful harvest, going back as many years as Bongu's careful, guilty memory could recall. The matchmaker, unwilling to align her family's name with a scandal, quietly departed before the sun had fully set. Hogu was ordered to repay every family he had shortchanged, in full, with the season's harvest still fresh in his storehouse to draw from. The old bowl, chipped and small and dishonest, was broken apart on the spot and replaced with the true government standard for every measuring from that day forward. Chungwa received her late husband's old share at last, 3 years late, and finally allowed herself to cry in front of the whole village without shame. Chilsung's family, for the first time in years, carried home more rice than they knew what to do with. His daughter, seeing the full sacks stacked against the wall, asked if this meant they would always have enough now. "Not always," Chilsung told her, smiling despite himself. "But at least now, no one can quietly take what is honestly ours." As for Hogu, he kept his land, for the official's authority did not stretch that far. But he never again showed his face at a village festival without lowered eyes and a much quieter voice. Bongu, to everyone's surprise, was the one who took over fair measuring duties from that season onward, determined, he said, to spend the rest of his years making up for the ones he had spent afraid. Seasons passed, and the story of that festival did not fade the way most village gossip does. Traveling merchants carried it with them from market to market until people 3 provinces away were telling their own children about the landlord, whose treasure turned out to be glass, and the farmer who dared to ask why his bowl always came up short. Some versions of the story grew taller with each telling. In one, Chilsung stood alone against 100 armed guards. In another, the pearl shattered on its own the moment the lie was spoken aloud. Chilsung only laughed whenever he heard these versions passed around the market square. It was only a merchant, a magistrate's official, and a very small wooden bowl, he would say. Nothing more dramatic than that. But however the story was told, its heart never changed. A dishonest man's pride, once put on public display, has a way of exposing itself far better than any accuser ever could. A cheat may fill his storehouse for years, but sooner or later, someone learns to read the bowl. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this.